The intense resistance of the beaches of Hakata Bay, combined with the catastrophic encounters with typhoons, later known as the kamikaze, remain vividly remembered in both Japanese and global narratives of the Mongol invasions. Having already explored the two invasion attempts, we now turn our attention to the first encounter between the Mongol horse archers and samurai warriors, highlighting the brave defense of the islands of Tsushima and Ikki. Tsushima Island, situated between the southern coast of Korea and the Japanese island of Kyushu, was an ideal base for Japanese pirates, known as Waku, who frequently raided Korean shores due to its proximity. The mountainous terrain of Tsushima offered little arable land. So many of its inhabitants relied on the sea for their livelihood, either through fishing or by making the short journey in Korea. In the 13th century, Korea was particularly vulnerable to these raids, as the kingdom was repeatedly invaded by the far more formidable Mongol horsemen of the Great Khan. Over a 30-year period, Mongol forces invaded Korea multiple times, forcing King Gojong to seek refuge on an island. During this period of upheaval, Japanese pirates launched several attacks on Korea, though these ceased after King Gojong made peace with the Mongols in 1259. These raids first brought Japanese attention to the Mongols, and Tsushima became a significant point of interest, especially as rumors spread about the immense wealth of Japanese monarchs. When the new Mongol emperor, Kublai Khan, began sending envoys to Japan in the 1260s, demanding that they submit to his heaven-ordained rule, Tsushima's proximity to Korea made it a natural stopover for the Khan's messengers. However, the Japanese government, the Kamakura Bakufu under Hojo Tokimone, consistently refused to receive Kublai's envoy. In 1269, a frustrated group of returning envoys captured two fishermen from Tsushima, Tojiro and Yeshiro, and brought them to the court of Kublai Khan. There, the most powerful man on earth received these humble fishermen, showcasing his grandeur and demanding that they convey his message to Hotakimone. The Khan sought only respect from the Japanese and wished to immortalize their king's name by having him at his court. However, upon their return to Japan, the fishermen were no more successful than Kublai's official envoys. These continued diplomatic rebuffs were not forgotten. The Kublai's ambitions only grew with the declaration of the Yuan dynasty in 1271, following the fall of the southern Song dynasty stronghold of Xiangyang. Preparations began for an invasion fleet against Japan. On November 2nd, 1274, an armada of approximately 20,000 Mongol, Northern Chinese, Jurchen, Khitan, and Korean soldiers and sailors abroad nearly 1,000 ships set out from Happo on Korea's southern coast. Tsushima was their first target. The initial strike put land there. By the evening on November 4th, the defenders had spotted the Mongol fleet off the coast of Tsushima. With only a small pirate and fishing vessels at their disposal, the Japanese lacked the naval power to challenge the Mongols at sea. At that time, Tsushima was governed by the So clan, led by So Sokikoni, who served as a deputy shugo, or military governor, of the islands. According to the Hachiman Gokun, a Japanese chronicle written shortly after the invasion, there was a shrine to Hachiman, the Japanese god of war, on Tsushima. Tradition holds that on the day the Mongol fleet approached Tsushima, a fire broke out at Hachiman's shrine, which was seen as a bad omen. The fire was eventually extinguished. The white doves were seen gathering on the shrine's roof, since doves were considered the messengers of Hachiman. Sokikoni interpreted this as a warning from the god, Why else would Hachiman set fire to his own shrine? Some modern authors have speculated that the doves might have started the fire, possibly by carrying incendiaries tied to them, marking the beginning of the Mongol attack on the island. Regardless, Sokikoni soon received word of the approaching fleet, rallying his forces, about 18 mounted samurai and their retainers. He led them through the night over rough terrain to the beach of Komoda, preparing them for the dawn. As the Yuan fleet approached Komoda beach early on the morning of November 5th, Sokikoni sent a small vessel to inquire about their intentions. However, with the Bakufu having repeatedly rejected the Great Khan's envoys, the time for diplomacy had long passed. Sokikoni knew that victory against such a massive force was unattainable, yet he still arranged defenders at Tsushima for battle as the enemy's smaller landing craft hit the shore. The primary weapon of the samurai was a bow, specifically their prized and iconic yumi, with which each warrior was highly skilled. Like the Mongols, the samurais fought as mounted archers, though their horseback maneuvers could not rival those of the steppe nomads, who were practically born in the saddle. The wealthiest samurai were well protected in their colorful and distinctive yoroi armor. But on a poorer island like Tsushima, few of the 80 samurai gathered by the Sokikoni would have been so well armored. For sidearms, Sokikoni's warriors carried single curved blades, with precursors to the famous katana, while the rest of his forces were armed with little more than spears and naginata. In contrast, the forces sent against Sokikoni were diverse. Under the command of the Mongol general Khotan, most of the infantry that Khotan deployed were Chinese and Korean levies raised by the Khan, armed with spears, large wicker or bamboo shields, and protected by cloth and gambeson-like armor. Following standard Mongol tactics, these troops, considered the most expendable, were sent in first wave to absorb enemy arrows, while the more valuable Khitan, Jurchen, Turkic, and Mongol horse archers disembarked from the ships. These horsemen, typically lightly armored but highly expensive, wielded exposits, bows that made them formidable adversaries for the samurais. However, the sea voyage and the process of leading their horses from the landing craft meant they could only slowly assemble, preventing them from immediately executing their usual flanking maneuvers. While the Mongols prepared their horses, the Korean and northern Chinese troops advanced against the samurai. Following samurai tradition, the battle began with a whistling arrow sent high into the air. According to Mongol custom, drums marked the start of their advance. Sokikoni's skilled warriors braced themselves for the impending assault. The samurai archers inflicted significant losses on the enemy as they advanced up the beach. As the Yuan forces drew nearer, the samurai's challenges for the single combat went unanswered by the Chinese and Koreans, who advanced behind large shields unfamiliar to the samurai. Facing overwhelming numbers and intense pressure, Sokikoni decided to withdraw his men to the line, where the Yuan advance began to slow. It was here that the samurai swordsmanship was particularly evident. One of the Sokikoni's most trusted allies, Saito Tosikasada, struck down several Yuan soldiers, including a high-ranking Mongol officer. Standing over the fallen officer, Tosikasada boldly issued challenges to the Mongols, daring anyone to face him in combat. The Mongols responded with a volley of arrows, 3 of which struck Tosikasada in chest, piercing his armor and ending his life. According to history of the Sou family, recognizing the dire fate that awaited them, Sokikoni fired the last of his arrows into the Yuan forces and led his men in a final, desperate cavalry charge. Ultimately, the defenders were overwhelmed, leaving the island vulnerable to the Mongol invaders. In the following week, Tsushima was overtaken, towns were burned, many lives were lost, and numerous women of the Sou family chose to end their lives to avoid capture. The treatment of prisoners was particularly brutal. Both Japanese and Yuan sources report that captives, mostly women, were subjected to cruel treatment, with wire threaded through their palms and displayed on the prows of ships. By November 13, Tsushima had fallen. Hoten directed the fleet to the next island, Ikki. On Ikki, the deputy Shugo, Taira Kagetaka, had managed to prepare his forces and had sent a call for help to Kyushu. After sending the women and children to Hinotsume castle, he took 100 mounted samurai and their retainers to confront the Yuan fleet on the northern beaches of the island. Kagetaka's forces managed to hold them off for a few hours, slowing the Yuan landing, but were ultimately unable to prevent it. As the Yuan forces established a foothold, Kagetaka had no choice but to retreat to Hinotsume castle by evening. The small wooden walls of the castle were ill-equipped to withstand the seasoned warriors who had captured Jiayang. Kagetaka sent his daughter, Katsuri Hime, with a lone samurai to deliver a message to the Bakufu and prepared for the desperate last stand as the Yuan forces encircled the castle. The woman and townspeople within the castle joined in the defense, hurling whatever they could at the enemy. Catapults and Mongol arrows quickly overwhelmed those on the walls, and when Kagetaka attempted to brave sortie through the grates, he was met with the grim sight of the Mongols using captives as human shields. With his forces dwindling, Kagetaka led the remaining survivors back into the castle. As a fort was consumed by fire and his remaining men fought to buy time, Kagetaka watched his family take their own lives before he, too, joined them in the final act of defiance. Ikki was consequently overrun, leading to widespread slaughter and other horrific events. Katsuri Hime did not make it to the shore. Her boat had ventured too close to Mongol arrows. Survivors, including Katsuri Hime's samurai bodyguard, carried news of the devastation of Tsushima and Ikki to the rest of Japan. According to popular tradition, upon hearing of those atrocities, Regent Hojo Tokimune declared it the most significant moment of his life. When a nearly priest asked how he planned to respond to the Mongol invasion, Tokimune shouted, "Katsu," victory, as previously mentioned. The Mongols did not achieve victory on the shores of Hakata Bay, but determined Japanese resistance. An unexpected storm forced the remnant of their fleet to retreat to Yuan territory. Unfazed by the resistance on the small archipelago, Kublai Khan launched another, even larger fleet against Japan after conquering the Song dynasty. In 1281, his forces returned to Tsushima and Ikki. Although details about these second invasions are sparse, it is known that local defenses once again fell swiftly. One account reveals that Saito Tosikasada, son Moriaki, continued his father's legacy by fighting the Mongols on the beaches of Tsushima. Another account described how the cries of children in the mountains of Tsushima alerted the Mongols to the presence of hiding families, resulting in the deaths of 300 people. Ultimately, the 1281 invasion turned out to be an even greater disaster than the first, with thousands of Chinese, Mongols, and Koreans meeting their end in the Sea of Japan's coasts. Defensive measures on Tsushima and other Japanese islands were maintained for the decades in anticipation of a potential Mongol return, which was frequently threatened but never came to pass. Encouraged by their success, Japanese pirates resumed their attacks on the coastline, launching continuous raids on Korea throughout the Yuan and Ming eras, eventually reaching as far as Malaysia. On Tsushima and Ikki, memorials honor the brave samurai who faced overwhelming odds, local heroes who sacrificed their lives in defense of their islands, small garrisons that stood against what may have been the most fearsome army in history.